Thanks, Guria. Good morning from my side. Indeed, I will talk about two cases which are not actually the cases we are working in Tampere inside this UEL. There are two cases where I wish we can a bit deepen these notions of countercurrents, and then also discuss the role of built environment, role of architecture and planning in playing a role facilitating something new, social spatial innovation, new ways to act, new ways to make lively communities, which in a way is the background notion of this whole JPE Urban Europe program, where our urban education life project is situated. How to find new ways to create vibrant, lively communities, social cohesion, especially in situations of marginalized people and groups. And as Guru said, this picture is a representation of our project in four countries, and today we'll hear about work in Sheffield and Milián. And Bucharest. In Finland, we have been working with the city of Salo, which is the former Nokia town. After Nokia's collapse, also the small town of Salo collapsed, so it's one of the crisis towns of Finland still today. And right now, when we are sitting here on Sunday morning, it's Sunday late afternoon in Finland, and my students are probably right now walking out from bus to the city of Salo. And Jens Brandt, our collaborator and active member of the team, is probably welcoming my students right now. So they start a special base camp week in Salo just this afternoon in Finland. Probably in next AAG, we could bring those results. We have been working in Salo with a local high school already, and with some parts of the city itself, also with some NGOs. So there is some preliminary work done in Salo in trying to kind of invite and engage especially high school students, and through them also other parts of that small community, to rethink what is Salo, what is the future of Salo, what could be done in new ways. I think it's a good example of the whole aim of our project. University takes a new role, students, teachers take a new role. We go to a place and we do one-to-one action. So that's I think quite crucial. We try to fight abstractions, do one-to-one. In Salo, we are using an empty shopping mall just in the very heart. There's a whole shopping mall empty, and we got the whole shopping mall. So the shopping mall is the base camp of Salo. But as said, it's kind of foretaste for next AAG from the Tampere side. As Grui already said, okay, urbanization being growth phenomenon, but it's also a very uneven process, and uneven process being old Gramscian notion of critical theory. There's always structurally linked dimensions of shrinkage, abandonment, alongside with the moments of growth and development. And this notion of countercurrents of urbanization, it's a pity that our audience is so small, but still it's good audience, and I would like to, in the discussion phase, go to that. We got a critique from the Finnish Academy, and one of those critique points was that this notion of countercurrent of urbanization, which we liked, and we thought this is quite a good way to describe this differential situation, because we are not only talking about shrinking cities, we are talking about Mexico City, we are talking about maybe London, we are talking about Barcelona, for example. They're not shrinking cities, but inside those metropolises that might be growing, that might be developing, there are pockets of something else, pockets of marginalization, pockets of abandonment, and so forth. And these two cases I will discuss today in my talk are examples of such situation: Helsinki and Santiago in Chile. They are not shrinking cities, but because of very specific reasons, there is a differential situation which could be grasped by this notion of countercurrent of urbanization. Good. It's interesting, but it's a question. In our theoretical frame, we are very much looking for qualitatively new phenomena, new approaches, new ways to deal with urban questions, new ways to deal with I said, questions of social cohesion, spatial equity, and so forth. And there is a theoretical discourse around these themes. Mike Batty, working in London, has been one of the persons to say that in kind of numerical terms, in numbers and percentages, urbanization, well, it cannot go over 100%. And in many of them, developed societies in Europe, also in Latin America, the urbanization rate is 89, 90, 91, 93, even in some cases. In that sense, urbanization has a limit as a process, and this growth cannot continue forever in some sense. But he has been making the point that it's actually quite uncertain what's happening to cities in the coming decades. In that sense, it also might be that the release is countercurrent in the sense that people make other choices, and of course in Europe especially, because the whole demography of Europe is not so growing. There are many examples of that. So there is a uncertainty in the quantitative sense of urbanization, many risks, and we are seeing quite diverse futures in coming few decades. But the interesting question is the qualitative change from industrial to urban society. That's of course a discourse that comes from Lehtovuori and has been expanded by many other authors. But I think it's quite interesting that these ideas were presented in late 60s and early 70s. It's 50 years ago. It's quite a while ago. And at that time, Lehtovuori, for example, was saying that yes, we are having this blind field of systemic change. We don't really see through the change from industrial to something else, to a new society. Now, after 50 years, I think we are in a much different position. We already can say much more about what is the new society after the industrial phase, and what are the qualitative changes that characterize our current and emerging society, which basically where the logics of work, adding value, the important issues are different. It's not anymore the industrial society system where there is mass production, adding value. There is public consumption of that in housing and infrastructure. There is question of leisure to ensure reproduction of labor, and then this traffic, this whole spatial program, something else, a new set of questions and a new spatial logic is emerging that is important for them emerging society, and again for the vibrancy, for the liveliness, for the high quality equity of urban communities today. Something of that we are studying in our project could be mentioned or referred to as social spatial innovations, for example. Good. To the two cases, here is a journal. We did a small article. It starts from page 68, which which describes these two cases. Remodelación San Borja in the city center of Santiago, Chile, and then Eastern Pasila in Helsinki, which is also quite central, not exactly in the city center, but central part of Helsinki. Basically, we should explore in the time remaining how certain shattering of them vision behind these projects. Both are modernistic projects, architectural urbanistic projects. How certain shattering of the original vision, which of course is industrial era vision. It's a vision of good organization of the industrial society and city. How that is creating exactly these moments of abandonment, moments of decline, moments of emptiness and under-definition, and how that is opening possibilities for something new, something interesting, and something relevant for the contemporary society and city. Here are two pictures of those cases: concrete, high-rise, and then this notion of split level, separating transport in the structuralistic 60s fashion is also representative of both cases. Examples of the 60s wave of city center renewal with modernistic / brutalist principles. They both represent kind of dreams of local dreams of modernization, capital cities taking new shape, and in both cases this vision was not really fully realized. These projects were cut half or stopped because of local reasons. In Chile, then regime change, the military coup stopped this funding for public housing programs like this. In Finland, basically, architectural fashion changed, and very soon, in early 70s, planners architects realized that this type of vision of split level, strict modernism is not what we want, and something softer, something more postmodern came in place. So only a small part of the original project was realized. Here is quick snapshots. You can maybe trace these towers in the San Borja case. Small part of the big plan was realized, and here is a snapshot of the grid in Eastern Pasila. In Chilean case, the extinct community was erased. 300 families were displaced. In the Helsinki case, there was a self-organized community of 3,000 that was also erased, and this new project was put in place with I said, high hopes of new urbanism of that time, but quite quickly was realized that not the best way further. In the Finnish case, as said, these elevated walkways, the system it raised criticism from the start, and in the San Borja case, this half-realized system was left underused, and then it was fenced off during 1990s. In both cases, these half finished and then underused spaces were first thought to be problems, some kind of problematic forgotten corners, but then now in recent years, about since 2010, they have found new uses. These spots that were thought to be problems, suddenly they became potentials, and new actors started to use them in new ways. In Helsinki, there is a international urban art program, Helsinki Urban Art, that started to find potentials in these blank concrete walls. There is so many places which kind of ask for something, maybe art, and that was used. It was possible to negotiate that a quite broad program of urban art takes over, and it becomes a almost like urban museum of contemporary urban art. Quite successful, I would say. There are some pictures of that. In the Chilean case, there is a young urban activist group who started a project called Pasarelas Verdes. It's basically a urban planting, urban food and music program that took over these empty elevated walkways, and they suddenly became socially central again. So different ways to find new uses, and in some ways, now after 40, 50 years, this dynamic public life that was envisioned actually came to take place in these modernistic, a bit difficult, non-typical spaces. Here's one picture from the Finnish case, big scale perspective mural. Here's overview of the Chilean case, this event taking place on the elevated walkway. And in some way, these elevated walkways, the very strict architectural approach, they have become contemporary cultural social spaces, and in some way, these ruptures, there is a debate about what is the heritage of modernistic architecture, that maybe the rupture is the heritage of that. But those ruptures have become powerful in making something new and unexpected to happen. And maybe this kind of observation could be valuable in other cases. It's now quite a big heritage protection issue, this 60s, 70s architecture. These environments are not valued high often, and they are either reshaped or taken down in very many places. Also, in an interesting way, this kind of revisiting of those spaces now tells about them. There's something about them, maybe possibilities of social transformation that was actually the original aim at the time, but was not really realized in the original situation. Much later, and in different sorts of situation, the physical architectural space can get new uses and new valuations. Failure created loose spaces, and these loose spaces are reappropriated now in such a way that the predefined agencies of different social groups, in the Chilean case, marginalized community, in the Helsinki case, artists who were pushed out still very recently, are being able to get new roles. Abstract space has been appropriated and reshaped, and this architectural form, which in some sense is radical, it cuts through familiarity, is creating seeds of the new in the social transformative sense. Thanks.